Do you want to take your parents to therapy and they just don't listen? What to do in that case? Here's a video talking about just that. Okay, hi, my name is Srishti Asthana Bisht. I'm a practicing psychologist. I speak about mental health and all things related. So, welcome to my channel. Take a cup of coffee or green tea and let's get started about the various factors that go into successfully taking your parents to therapy or when to accept perhaps that it's not going to happen. The first part of it, understanding why you want to send your parents to therapy. So, adult children, teenagers, or children, perhaps in some rare cases, want to send their parents to therapy because of many, many factors, right? I think because a lot of youngsters have taken to social media, they're following the accounts of mental health advocates, mental health professionals. There is so much bombardment of information, and adult children often realize what is the huge impact of mental health in the day-to-day reality of their life, and they understand that parents are an integral part of that reality, because as Indians the family is one unit, right? Like, you can't separate your well-being from your parents' well-being, from the family's well-being. It's very hard for Indians to think of just themselves. When we understand our culture, right, we feel like we are a part of a bigger system. Okay, and it's kind of like this. So this is you, this is the bigger system, right? But if we look at it from a Western lens, when we look at it from, and a lot of the content on social media is influenced by the Western lens of looking at the self, right? So in other cultures, in the westernized lens, it is the individual and it is the society. So these are two separate entities that are existing parallelly. But in the Indian context, you and your well being exist within the part of society, right? So as a young person, you realize that, and you realize the importance of the well being of other people around, and you wish to impact that, you wish to meaningfully contribute to that. And that might be encouraging you to take your parents to therapy. And that's wonderful. That's a great change. And I think it can also lead to a greater impact on the culture when that does happen, when the older generations go to therapy. And it's such a progress, right? But there is one thing we need to understand: when we are taking our parents to therapy, we need to have certain realistic expectations out of it. Okay, what are those realistic expectations? That I'll discuss a little more in the next section, where we discuss the parents part in it, their psyche, their profile, their thought process, their gender, etc. Coming back to you, if you expect your parents to go to therapy so that you can take care of your mental health, so that your life can be a little better, if you're set on that belief system, okay, that till they're not better, I won't be better, my life won't be easier, my life won't be lighter, then it can be a setup for self-defeating situations. Okay, so for example, let's say there is a female, she is 23 years old, she fully realizes that the situations at home are not good and the relationship between the parents is not that great. And she's grown up in a household where the parents were constantly fighting, yapping, screaming, shouting, blaming, right? And she's grown up very anxious, very hyper vigilant, consciously super aware of the environment. Ab kya ho raha hai? Ab kya ho raha hai? Right? That's how the brain works for such a person many times. And she feels ki if they stop fighting, if their relationship gets better, then I'll get better. Then my body will feel lighter. Then the hypervigilance will go away. Then I'll have no reason to worry. But the truth is, some part of the damage is done, and now we need to readjust, relearn, and reintegrate our experiences and its impact on us, regardless of the fact that whether the parents change or not. It's a choice that they'll have to make, and you'll have to respect them as adults to make that choice. And if they don't make that choice, what does that say about your well being, your therapeutic journey, your growth as a person? So don't make your entire wellness journey dependent on the fact that if you're able to convince your parents to seek help or not. Okay? And just getting them to therapy is a win in itself, but making them stick there, making them stay there, that becomes a whole different conversation. Another subpart of your psyche is, many times when younger people, when they leave the house, when they go out, they identify themselves, they start having a life of their own. Sometimes there is a guilt that Indian adult children or teenagers experience. It's a guilt that, oh, I have a sense of self outside of the household. And many parents don't receive that very well. Okay, so let's say there is a male who is 30 years old, and they lost a parent, they lost a father at a young age. Now they've spent their entire 20s working super hard on ensuring that they can provide for their mother, right? And now, as an adult navigating the world, navigating life, they have to take a job perhaps a little far away from the mother. They can't stay in the same town as her. And she feels down, she feels low, she feels upset. And now this person can experience so much guilt. And as I mentioned, in the Indian culture context, it's the self and the society and the people in society and family, etc. Okay. So when people in that system are suffering, then allowing yourself to be open to life, to take chances, to grow in career, to really experience and embrace life the way an average person would, that sometimes it becomes a challenge. So this person might be, this male who's 30 might be going through his entire life feeling super, super guilty that I'm leaving my mother behind, I'm leaving my mother behind. What about her trauma? What about her grief? What about her loss, etc.? So the even if this person is outside and they're working super hard for 5 days a week and then they get the weekend, um, they are not able to just go party, relax, and chill. Their brain is still at home, right? Their minds are still with the mother. So, in order to deal with that guilt, sometimes this person might want to send their mom to therapy. So, now the work always, it's twofold. It's you working on yourself and encouraging your parents to work on themselves. It's not one directional. Any mental health challenges that you are struggling with, it's not going to fully resolve even if your parents work on themselves. You might think that is the case, but more often than not, that's not the case. Okay. So these are some of the factors you need to keep in mind about your own self when you're encouraging your parents to go to therapy. Sometimes they might not see why it's so important to meet so consistently, and so many things, so many factors are playing a role there. So, yeah, so this is the parental part of trying to get parents to go to therapy. Very few parents are like, oh, yes, let's go to therapy, let's work on ourselves. Understand that this generation is more comfortable with the idea. Previous generations are not as comfortable with the idea. They are now only getting used to it, they are learning about it, right? So, absolutely, these factors play in a huge role and they really matter. Okay. So, now coming to the third part, the role of the therapist in all of this. Let's discuss that a little bit. So, as I mentioned previously, pro bono and low cost sessions for which parents might easily agree for, they are provided by young budding therapists and they try their best, but sometimes that age gap is hindering in forming the therapeutic relationship or forming the alliance that is actually very important and it's a very core part of the therapeutic work. So, if there's not a strong relationship between the therapist and the client, if the client doesn't learn to trust the therapist, then good therapeutic work can't happen in the bigger scheme of things. So, if the age becomes a barrier, of the age of the therapist becomes a barrier, but sometimes an age appropriate therapist. Okay, so we might want to, from our perspective as younger people, what we think as the ideal therapist. Okay, maybe we are looking for a therapist who understands intersectionality, impact of politics on one's psyche, etc. So we want that. But if you look at it from the parents' lens, these notions are pretty alien to them. They'd rather prefer a therapist with the gray hairs, with who's clearly the same age, or a therapist who's been married, who probably can really get the lived experiences. Of course, therapists are definitely trained to empathize with everyone and everyone's lived experiences, but now the age of the therapist also can play a role here. So, when you're trying to match your parent with a therapist, don't think about who is the right therapist for you in your perspective. Think about who's the right therapist for my parents. Okay. And that can be an older therapist, that can be a Hindi speaking therapist, a Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil speaking therapist, etc. It can be a therapist who knows the local language, who knows the local culture, who really understands the struggles that parents face, right? Like older people, when what challenges they face, right? So these are some of the factors, and I've covered these issues and these aspects. Let me know your thoughts on these particular factors by commenting down below on this video. The next part of it is Fruitfulness versus accessing a safe space. Sometimes, as younger people, we have very rigid notions of what productive therapy looks like. We might think that productive therapy means there will be these outcomes by 3 month window, 6 month window, 1 year window, etc. Um, it might not be that linear. Okay. Sometimes the role that a therapist plays in the parent's life is just to access a space where they can finally breathe, where they can finally talk about things that they've never spoken about to anyone in their entire lives. And that's truly the case. Like, for example, there might be a parent who experienced sexual assault as a child and they never spoke about it to anyone. There are parents who open up about their own lived experiences, their own childhood, right? So, speaking about things that weigh so heavily on them. So, even if you don't notice very tangible changes in the parent that you would like to see as a result of therapy, it's important to maintain the patience. It's important to trust the therapist to do their jobs. So, don't try to take charge of therapy for parents. Don't try to control the outcomes. Don't try to make it be a very specific way as per what you consider progress. You can't gatekeep it. You can't micromanage it. You'll have to trust the therapist. So once you find a therapist that you can trust them to do their jobs. Let them do their jobs. Okay? These are my 2 cents on the entire subject of Indian parents and therapy. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear an overview of what it was like for you to take your parents to therapy. Um, And if you like me to make certain videos on certain topics, feel free to comment that down below. Or you can leave a DM to me on my Instagram, or you can mail me if you're looking for a recommendation for a good therapist for your parent. Feel free to DM me on Instagram. I can definitely provide a recommendation. I'd be happy to, right? So I hope this video helps. Let me know your thoughts. Once again, I've said this way too much throughout this video. But yes, I'll see you in the next video. If you found this video to be helpful in any way, if you like the information, do subscribe to the channel and share this video with a friend of yours who might be considering taking their parents to therapy so that they can keep all of these things in mind. Okay? All right. Um, Take care. Bye bye, I guess. This is such an awkward ending, but I'm going to let it stay this way. Thank you. Take care.